We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. So welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Danielle Dupre, and she is a holistic doc neuromind coach, and I'm sure you're going to tell us more about that, which is really interesting. And the biggest subject we're going to talk about today is legal abuse. That's going to be a big subject. And so welcome, Danielle, and thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. So tell us about you and tell us about, what is it? Holistic Doc Neuromind Coach.
Yeah, well, first, my accent. I grew up in the French part of Switzerland. I practiced English in India. And for some reason, my accent got mixed up between French and Indian. So people don't listen to me until they figure out, is she from Ukraine? Is she from Germany? They know French with an Indian accent in it.
Oh, that's funny. That's cute.
So anyway, I grew up until I was 24. Then I also traveled through Europe, the Middle East, parts of Asia. Came to this country, the U.S. in 1979. I was just gonna cross over the U.S. and continue going around the world. And I got married, had children, got divorced, and yeah. So I studied different things. I was very interested in becoming a doctor. I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and my parents couldn't afford the studies, so I went into psychology. At 15, I had skin cancer. Was diagnosed with skin cancer, surgery every 6 months.
Ooh.
And the Institute of Psychology I was studying was in Paris, also was teaching about nutrition. So they said, why don't you check that out? And I did. I bought my first juicer when I was 18 and did a deep cleanse and never went back to the surgeon for skin cancer.
And
So
never had
to
skin
me, it
cancer
worked.
again.
No, and to me, I had a lot of toxins because I had a lot of injections when a lot of vaccine when I was a kid, but I still got the disease from the vaccine. That the vaccine was supposed to prevent, and I grew up on antibiotics.
Ooh.
So I was constantly sick, and I think that's there's a connection between toxins and cancer. I think my body was trying to get rid of the toxins. I helped it with the nutrition. I already had my life planned, so I didn't have to do much in the way of mental or emotional. But cancer is
Mm-hmm.
tricky. You can have some people have to change 98% of their life to heal a cancer. There's a lot of emotion and trauma. That was not my problem. My problem was just getting rid of toxins.
It
And
it kind
then
of makes sense though, because I had recently heard that, the liver is our filtration system. And if you can keep your liver healthy and, keeping it clean, cancer cannot attach. So it kind of makes sense, like what you're saying, that, you did a cleanse and you cleansed your liver along with it. And
Yep,
therefore the cancer was no more.
yep. So that's it. Cancer is very tricky. Sometimes people get cancer because they're not following their life path. And the cancer is kind of a wake up call. We don't listen, and all of a sudden we diagnose with a catastrophic illness. Say, ooh, where'd that come
Yeah.
from?
Yeah. It gets your attention.
So yes, and I hadn't planned on having children, and I got seven, and I loved it. Actually, I became a professional mother. I homeschooled my kids. I home birthed them, but was not very happy. It was not a happy marriage, and it was kind of in a cult. And when I divorced, then everything went sideways. That was the legal abuse that I got trapped in for many years. So I had a background in nutrition, had a background in psychology, and now I say, I still do neurosurgery, but without a scalpel. I help
Mm-hmm.
people change their mind, their mindset without the scalpel, just doing psychology, NLP, hypnosis, different things.
Mm-hmm. Different
But
modalities.
I had, yeah, different modalities that I learned, and that I learned after going through the legal abuse that left me with complex PTSD, and they call anhedonia, where all my feelings and sensation and emotions flatlined. And I was told I
Mm.
would have to learn to live like that, and I didn't like that. So I learned even more modalities and pulled myself out. That's why I can now help people who have gone through kind of extensive trauma.
Hmm. They call that post-traumatic growth. That's what I
Yeah,
understand.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're helping others, which is beautiful. So tell us a little bit about your journey with the legal abuse and the system. Because I used to work in the legal system, actually. I worked in law firms for years. And it was not this type of law that we're kind of getting into. But I mean, I can see there's, what frustrated me about the legal system is there's so much gray area.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to work for a legal firm when I was in Switzerland.
Mm,
And I mean, somebody sent a letter, an attorney sent you a letter, you had 10 days to respond. And there was kind of a rules, you follow the rules. And I found out when I started, I expected the same thing, but there was no rules. It seems every court, the judge in every court decides what he wants for
hmm.
rules. So, I was kind of foolish of my part to expect a nice divorce. It didn't happen. And there was a lot of abuse during the marriage, abuse with the children. And when I went to court, the father had hardly ever taken care of the children. And we went to court, and I thought I was going to get custody because the children lived with me. I homeschooled them. And then he got custody, and the whole battle started. So the
How
judge
how
was
did
in
the
there.
judge justify that? How did the judge justify the children had lived with you and well both of you, but you were the primary caretaker. How did he justify that he
I
could
don't
get the
know that the
children?
judge, there is what they call a cottage industry in family court, where psychologists decided, well, a judge does not understand the psyche, the what's going on. We're gonna tell the judge, how he should do the custody. So you have all kind of psychologists now that work for the court, and kind of they've been brainwashed a lot by different sides, and depending which side the judge is on, then the
Yeah.
judge generally wants to do 50-50 custody, but it doesn't work where you have one parent that's abusive. That's, I learned later
Yeah.
on my ex was a pedophile. Why would
Oh
you give
God.
custody to a pedophile?
Ugh.
So, his father's sister wrote a letter to the judge, said, don't give custody to my brother. He raped me for 8 years and molested my daughter. And 6 weeks later, he had full custody of the children. And I had supervised visitation, which he had to set them up. He never did. I didn't see my children for 2 years.
Oh God, that's gotta be I just can't
And
even
it's
imagine.
everywhere in family court. The statistic I heard is there are 58,000 children a year that are being put with an abusive parent. There's
Oh
about
God.
one who is murdered every 10 days. It makes the whole system work because they know
Oh
if
my
the children are put with the abusive parent, the protective parent will keep trying to get custody to protect the children. So you have all kind of psychologists that get involved. You have attorneys that get paid, and it's like a 30, I forgot if it's million or billion-dollar business.
God. Yeah, yeah, yeah. By the time you pull in all the experts, I mean,
Yeah.
that is one thing if you can at all avoid it, not going through the court system with your children because of that very thing. All of a sudden, all these other people have the say in where your children go and what's happening with your children. All of a sudden, you can say whatever you want, but they're making the final decision. That's frightening.
Yeah, and I thought I had prepared all the paper. I thought my ex was going to agree just to sign. We're going to divide things. We still were, he came for Christmas, for birthday. I was still cutting his hair. And so I filed for divorce. It took him a long time. Just looking at the papers, he went behind my back and hired a powerful attorney. And the attorney said, we're going to accuse her of parental alienation. So instead of going to visit You just say that she's not allowing you to see the children. And that's what he did. He wouldn't come. We decided he would come and eat dinner with us, and he wouldn't come. He wouldn't come. And then he told the judge, well, she's alienating the children. And then I was punished for that. They took the children away. And I had never been without my children. We spent all our time together. I was homeschooling 7 children, so we were always together.
Oh my
And it was
gosh.
horrible when they took the children away.
I can't even imagine. I can't imagine how that would be at all.
And then we had the psychologist that did the first report. And I'm not exaggerating. There's 13-page report. There is not one paragraph that is correct. It's all twisted. And the kids and I went camping because the kids asked, if we could go camping. I borrowed some material from a friend. We went camping 3 times, and the last time was in October. It got cold that night, and decided camping season is over. Gave the material back. Her report said 7 times I was forcing the children to sleep outside, and they were cold. And the whole report was like that. I had started, my ex decided that it would be better for me to work in San Francisco. I would have more clients. So I started, it was a 3.5 hour drive to go there. And then I
Ooh.
became president of an association there. So he had the kids on every other weekend. And the weekend he didn't have the kids, I was in Marin County networking. But I didn't have clients yet. And my kids came with me. Well, we went camping there. And I went to visit the ex-president of the group that I had become president, and she lived beside George Lucas' home. The
Oh
guy who
wow.
made Star Wars, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
When my
yeah.
kids heard that, they say, "Mom, we'd like to come with you." So they came. They looked at the house. Went back. We had a big van at the time. They played a game while I talked with my friend. And then we went back home, and the report said I was forcing the children to spend all day in the van while seeing my clients. I didn't have any clients. I was just starting there, and they wanted to come and visit, look at George Lucas' home. And one of the sibling was living there, and then we spent time at one of my colleagues' house. She had canoes, and we went boating. We went to something called Marine World Africa, USA. I'm gonna have to drink something, but the whole thing was twisted.
Um, I'm going to ask an obvious question. Is your ex a narcissist?
He was
I mean,
diagnosed
that's
by a
he.
psychologist, a family therapist, and a psychiatrist as a dangerous psychopath.
There you go. There you go.
So he was beyond narcissist.
Was he diagnosed before or after your divorce?
No, during the divorce, these people were my colleagues and they came to visit.
So I'm going to ask an obvious question. Was your ex diagnosed a narcissist? Because that's narcissistic behavior.
Yes, it is, but apparently it went beyond that. I had a psychologist who knew him, a psychotherapist that was a friend that came often, and then a psychiatrist tell me he's a dangerous psychopath.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
given, says there's not much we can do to help you right now because you're in the middle of it. But I read a book that they gave me. I forgot the name, and then a movie to watch, and I think it was called High Crime, and it explained the type of mentality he had. And then I was reading books, and it's amazing because I remember being during a trial where he was telling the judge something, and they say, "Well, Your Honor, this is not what he wrote," and yet, and then he changed, turn a 180, say exactly the opposite, and the judge still bought it because apparently psychopaths, sociopaths have that ability to feel what the other person wants, and it's just amazing how they can turn something around.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. My brother is kind of a sociopath and narcissistic, and both those behaviors, and I don't know how they. they're able to convince everybody else that you're the bad guy, and I don't know how they can do
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
I know in and I experienced a narcissistic relationship, and it's an art. It really is, that they're able to convince people, and you're standing there going, why can't you people see this
The
truth? Like,
facts. They're
yeah,
all
the
facts.
facts. Because I actually had a very dear friend who a couple of years ago went through a lawsuit with her narcissistic ex-boyfriend, and the things that he convinced that judge of, that was so obvious, and she ended up losing even though there was clear evidence of what he was doing. It is so bizarre. I don't understand that at all. But your ex-husband was able to do that.
Yep. Yeah, and I had read about it, and then I just witnessed it in courts. They just amazing. And then my children ran away twice. Well, I got a copy of the letter that my sister-in-law, whom I hardly talk to, that telling the judge don't give the children to him. He raped me for 8 years. I read that letter in the evening, and we were supposed to go to court the next day. My daughter was, I was driving, but my heart went into fibrillation. So she drove me to the hospital. She saw me in a hospital connected to all kind of stuff, and she said, "Mom, I'm gonna take the kids away. I'm gonna protect them." And she was 17. She said, "I bought that car with a big trunk. I'm gonna take the little ones, and
Hmm.
I'm gonna raise them." And she did. She went, from California to Colorado. I don't know where she went at this. She had found some place. She knew that she could be tracked with her cell phone, so she would not. She would go to a cabin, call somebody, who called somebody, who then called me, saying, "Your children, they're doing fine."
Mm-hmm.
And then another of the father's sister intervened. She had quite a bit of money. Said, "We're going to protect the kids. Let them come to Florida. The court's not going to take them. I'm going to protect them because I know what happened to my sister." And then I was talking to the DA, and he said, "Yeah, there is no way we're going to give him custody." So I told the children, and she paid for the flight to Florida. When they arrived, the father was there and got full custody. So they went back with the father.
Oh my God. Wait, what happened? Didn't the DA say he wouldn't do that?
That's right. He said that.
Oh my God.
So they went back to the father, and I wasn't allowed to see my children. And then the father accused one of my daughters to have stolen her aunt's purse. And I wasn't there. It was a big discussion. She took a knife. She was afraid.
Oh
She called
God.
the cops and says, "I'm afraid of my dad." So the cops came. They handcuffed her and put her in a police car, and she was driven to a mental hospital.
Oh my God. Oh,
And she never took any of the medication because she told the doctor, "I don't need
it's
medication. The
not me.
situation is crazy. It's not me." And then he was threatening to put my youngest daughter also in there if she didn't behave. Anyway, they went back, and they were constantly under the threat of going back to a mental hospital. So they managed to run away again. At the time, I was living in Las Vegas with my two oldest daughter. We had gone to see an attorney, and the attorney said the children cannot come to you because they're going to jail you. So
Mm-hmm.
let's get a protective order. So the children run away again from California to Las Vegas. Went with my oldest daughter to see the attorney. They asked for protective order. We didn't get them. And it was like 4 months later, the U.S. Marshals surrounded our house, arrested my oldest daughter and myself. My oldest daughter spent 4 days in jail. She had to decide whether she was going to stay in jail to pay for her father's attorney fee, or just work and pay for her father's attorney fees. She then, took 4 jobs, and in Las Vegas, she didn't even have a car at that time. She was rollerblading from one job to another, sleeping on a bench when she could, so she could afford, to pay her father's attorney fees. I spent 6 months in maximum security with murderers and drug dealers. They accused us of having kidnapped the children. We were 500 miles away. The children ran away. They had a driver's license, they had a vehicle, people had helped them. but we were accused of kidnapping the children. I still have a record as a felon for child stealing. So I spent 6 months in jail, and then when I went out, Karen Huffer, who wrote the book Legal Abuse Syndrome, contacted me. And then we worked together. We had a support group for people going through protracted litigation. And it was not only family court, there was a lot of abuse also in probate court, elder abuse, wrongful termination, HOA. So every week we would help people with different modalities, different techniques, so they could keep their head above water. And once it's over, then help them recover. But Karen Huffer, she passed away a few years ago. She was a marriage and family therapist and became a forensic psychologist. She saw that her clients were doing fine until they went to court. And then she had to start the therapy over. And
Mm-hmm.
she studied that for like 20 years. And then where she coined that term legal abuse syndrome.
Yeah.
And to her, it's a subset of PTSD. She
Mm-hmm.
wanted to have it in a DSM-5, but she passed away before. So
It really should, because honestly, the things I've experienced and the things that I've witnessed, there is a lot of that, a lot of legal abuse that goes on, and it is traumatic to go through any kind of lawsuit. I mean, even if you go to small claims, I mean, that's not it's scary. I've done it myself,
yeah,
but when you get
exactly.
into a full on lawsuit, you know, and one of the things the attorneys I used to work for would do, and they would sit down with their client and tell them mentally what you're going to go through, because people don't think about that. They don't think about the mental side of going through a lawsuit. And even though you may be 100% right, you're going to be dragged through the mud, and there's
Yes.
going to be, your life is going to be put on that, in that courtroom. And every step of the way is stressful. It's not just stressful in trial. So it may take you 2 years to get to trial, and it's scary.
Yeah, and then you're supposed to go to a trial or to a what is an audition something, and then it's reported and reported, and there's always something, or the secretary of the attorney would call and say, "Oh, do you know we're going to court tomorrow?" No, and it was an hour drive to go there. And then I was in Las Vegas, and the court continued in Sonora, so I had to drive 500 miles. They refused to let me appear on Zoom or whatever. I had to drive once a month to go there to be in court. And then I became an ADA advocate, so I could help people who had some kind of handicap, is either physical or especially mental. But
Yeah.
I don't do that any longer because there's so much corruption. There is no way to get justice. The last time I was with a woman here in Colorado was a few years ago, and she had three daughters, 9, 11, and 13. I didn't know much of the case because I was just pushed in court because the previous ADA advocate was kicked out by the judge illegally. So I was pushing court, say, "You an ADA advocate, go help her." And first, the was a divorce and custody. He had three attorneys that grilled me to know, who I was, where I stood, and which is illegal. They're not allowed to do that with an ADA advocate. And then I'm supposed to be seated beside my client,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the defendant and I forgot the other one. Usually they separated. But there she was right there, and her husband was behind her, breathing in her neck with two attorneys beside. And she had a panic attack. The judge ordered her to stop the panic attack. Well, she couldn't. So, we were able to go outside, but I was not allowed to be beside her to monitor her. And for 9 hours, it was like an inquisition court. They just accused her of one thing after another. Now, she had found, I think, the journal of the 13-year-old was talking about how the kids were molested and abused, and it was horrible. But she was not allowed to talk about that. And then during the evening, she had another panic attack. She went to the hospital. The next morning, she was still in the hospital, so I went to court, told the judge she's in the hospital. Obviously, she's not going to be able to stand trial. The judge said, "Well, I'll decide whether I'm going to continue or not." So I went to the hospital to pick up my client. During that time, the judge, she lost her parental rights. she's not allowed to see her children till they're 18.
Oh my God.
And she spent 1 year in jail for not immediately obeying a court order. She had, I think, like a GoFundMe type thing. Said, her husband had a lot of money. She didn't give any names or anything. She just explained, my children are being molested. I'm trying to fight for them. And I guess the judge, if I remember well, told her to remove that from Facebook. And she was out in the back country, didn't get the email on time, and she was a few days late and spent a year in jail.
Oh my goodness.
And then she had precancerous problem on her skin. The judge decided she didn't have cancer. I had the paper showing that she had PTSD. The judge decided she didn't have PTSD. So I went to the ADA coordinator in the court and did nothing. So I went to the state ADA coordinator. She told me, well, that's a judge's court. She can do what she wants, which is not true because judges are servants of the people. So
Mm-hmm.
I went to the DOJ because the ADA advocates are supposed to be protected by the DOJ and never got a response.
Oh, do you know what she's doing today? Do you know how she's
She is
doing?
out. She went into some religious type nutrition thing. I know,
Oh,
no,
bless her
we're
heart.
not in contact anymore. And I don't do that. What I do is I help people to try to keep their head above water during
Yeah.
the trials so they can keep going, and then I help them recover after. But standing in court, to me, it's a waste of time until we change the whole court system,
Yeah, it's
make it
broken.
a human place. It's.
It's
And
broken.
when I started the divorce, my neighbors told me, well, you're going to lose everything. You're a woman, you have an accent, and you have two doctorates. The judge is not going to like that. And I laughed, it was 98, 99. I said, this is the 20th century. That doesn't happen any longer. And I lost everything. And then I had an attorney. My uncle paid like $1,500 to do a change of venue. Could have
Mm-hmm.
done that, myself. Is pretty easy. But anyway, the attorney said, I'm not going to take your money anymore because the judge doesn't like you. You're going to lose.
So we're just going to throw the towel in, and that's just what you have to live with.
Yeah. And then I had, my son had problem with allergies. He was not supposed to eat dairy or wheat products. And I mean, the judges didn't know about that, but the father fed him some cream cheese and pasta, and I guess he had a hard time breathing during the night. So the father took him to the emergency room. Said the mother is a naturopath. She doesn't want to do anything to help my child breathe. And they turned the whole thing against me and forced him to have surgery to remove his adenoids, which he didn't need to. Because I went to another doctor, I had all kind of tests done. He did not need a surgery. And they had him go and have surgery that he didn't, just to spite me because I was a naturopath. And I had been trained in preparing people before surgery, and I was not allowed to be with my son. And after he came out of the hospital, I had neighbors calling and say, your son's not doing good. You need to come get him. So I wasn't allowed to do
You
it.
couldn't.
No.
So, how did you get out of this? How did this thing turn around? So for 2 years, you didn't have your children. You spent a year in jail.
Yeah.
All this, everything that you tried to do to make it right, the judge ruled against you.
Yep. And then I had that intuition. The judge changed, and I made a motion to have custody back.
So you
And
changed. So change of venue means what it means, so the audience understands that you change judges, basically, or even change
well,
courts,
change of venue, we started in Mariposa County, and then we both moved to a different county. So
county.
change
Yeah.
of venue, I thought maybe starting in another venue.
Yep.
Yeah. And when I was living in Las Vegas, my ex-husband was still in California. I did the change of, I asked for a change of custody to get my kids back.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a new judge, and he said, he listened to the kids, and they seem to, want to live with you, until he heard from the other judge. But anyway, so I got custody of my kids. My son is a dwarf. Okay, so he have kind of bigger head, but he was
Mm-hmm.
very, very smart. He's one of was the best reader I had of all my children. And after he got back from the hospital, he had lost the ability to read. We had to start all over, and that happened with anesthesia. And
Oh,
anyway, the father, well, obviously we were not living together, so the father put the kids in public school, and he convinced the teachers that he was kind of dumb and retarded. So they put him in special education. So when I got custody back, he was in special ed in sixth grade. He came to Las Vegas. He passed the test, the state test the following year at the eighth grade level without special ed. He just was given more time to read. And we thought, hey, the judge's going to be all happy, right?
should be.
You know what the judge said? The state of Nevada must have cheated on the tests. Therefore, the son will come back living with the father. And he spent his two last years, 16, 17, 18 year, with the father. Hardly went to school because he was too dumb, I guess. I went to a parents, what is it called? Parents teacher conference.
Hmm.
And they were talking about the kid. That was not my kid. I mean, he just couldn't do this. He couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. He spent like half a day a week in school, and then the rest of the time he was isolated in a house watching movies.
I was going to say the reason why he was struggling is not because he couldn't do it. It's because of the environment he was living in and that he didn't have the support and the help and he wasn't going to school. That's why he
No,
was
because
struggling.
in the years that he was with me, he had passed everything, so he did not really need to go to school. I mean, the whole thing was just didn't make any sense. I tried to appeal and then found out the two of the appeals judge were friends with a judge that I had. So obviously it didn't go anywhere. And then they recorded the it's not an audition. I can't even find the word when you go to court.
The mediation or the or
No, it's
arbit-
not a mediation. Just going to court. Have a
the
we had
trial, the actual trial
It
itself
was
or the
not a
court hearing?
trial. Yeah, we had a trial, which was another thing. But no, it was just we had to go every month to evaluate, the
Oh,
situation. So where was I going with that? Yeah, I was driving 500 miles, and the judge told the children, "Okay, I want you to go visit your father. I think it was every other month. If that doesn't work, then you will not have to come anymore." So at the end of the year, we went back, and the judge said, "Well, actually, we're going to make you go now every month for another year, and then we'll see." But the judge was lying. And then it seemed the judge had problem with his granddaughter who didn't want to go to college. So he went on the whole diatribe about, with my daughter, forcing her to go to college
this is
because
so
his granddaughter.
bizarre.
I mean, the whole thing just makes no sense. But yeah.
I know it to be true because I experienced this not on a trial I was on, but actually a trial I was involved in when I worked at a law firm. And I came into this trial, well, we were getting ready to go to trial, but it had been going on for years that this lawsuit had just been for years. And it was the judge was doing the same thing. It was I was sitting there watching his rulings and everything, and I had been apprised of the case and all of the rulings that had happened that were so bizarre that you start to think, is this judge being paid off? Seriously. It was so out there, and you're sitting there watching this, and there's nothing you can do. It's so bizarre, and I mean, the attorneys even thought for a while that maybe the judge somehow, some way, was being paid off by the defendant. It was that crazy.
Well, my ex was good. He made friends with policemen and the DA, so eventually he didn't need an attorney any
Oh.
longer. But he had the best attorney, or the most crooked one, but who was getting what his clients wanted. And one time I got a judgment where I had to produce paper from Switzerland. I had had skin cancer, and I had to prove I had skin cancer like 30 or 40 years back, like a hospital would keep. And if I didn't produce them by that time, then I would be in contempt of court. So I went to the court, And I says, I got this judgment. There's no way I can abide by that. And the clerk, they looked at it and say, well, yeah, that's a judge's signature, but it's not our stamp. It's the attorney that stamped that judgment. It was not the judge. And they say, we're
Oh.
going to go after the attorney. And, they never did.
How long ago did all this get resolved?
When my last kid turned 18.
Which was when?
So, oh, when did he turn 18? He was born in 94.
Okay.
And
So it really hasn't been that long in the grand scheme of things, really.
no, and I'm still, if you want, suffering. First of all, he got all the IRA, all the money that,
Oh,
the pension fund, everything went to him. I got no child support, no family support. And because I had doctorates, the judge, I never really worked. I was taking care of my kids.
right.
I was homeschooling. We had gardens. I was making their clothes. The judge decided, oh, you have a PhD, so imputed me a $10,000 a month income.
Oh God.
And
That's what you could possibly make, not what you're making, right? That's what he's
no, I
saying.
wasn't making, and there was, I talked to my colleagues, they weren't making that, especially not in a little place in the Sierra Mountains. Okay, so, but, and for the first couple of years, I thought I was losing my mind,
Oh yeah.
and then I found groups and say it's not you. That's a whole system, and I studied to attend different conferences. There's hundreds upon hundreds of cases like that, thousands.
Mhm.
There is 58,000 kids that are being put with the wrong, the abusive parent, and some are being murdered, some are committing suicide, and then it's traumatic. I'm still a felon for child stealing. Who wants to hire somebody that has stolen children? It
That
was my
sounds horrible.
teenager running away. Yeah, I can't even go to a rental because they want your criminal record. My criminal record said child stealing or child kidnapping. So yeah, it's not easy. Many women just don't make it back. I'm fortunate I have children that
Mm-mm.
have been helping me, but it's been a tough road. But in
Yeah.
some way, then I can help people.
Yeah. And I mean, the system is definitely broken. That and the foster system. They're both very, very,
No,
very
that's
broken.
yeah.
Very broken. And you went through a lot. I can't imagine what your children went through, and thank God that you are the stable one in their life that, can help them through this. Cause it just, everything you're describing about him from what I fortunately in my narcissistic relationships, I didn't, my second husband passed away, the narcissist, the full-on narcissist. So I didn't go through a divorce, but I have heard and I've had friends who've experienced this behavior, and I don't know how they do it, but they're able to turn this stuff around against you and convince other people that you're the crazy one and not them.
Mhm.
They've had a lifetime of learning how to do this. The part that you haven't even touched on is the financial cost this had on you. Because I can't imagine how much money was spent going to court just fighting to get one little thing, to
But
get custody
since
of your children.
he had attorneys, I couldn't afford attorneys,
Right.
so I had to learn, how to go to court. And it seems every time, oh, I understand how to do a motion, I did it, and they changed the rules. It was not at all like, and in Switzerland, I would, secretary would call me and say, you're going to court tomorrow, and I would arrive, and they were giving me a motion. You're supposed to get a motion so you can respond,
Right.
and I was just constantly on the spot.
Right.
So, and then
And the court systems, you were pro bono, so you were representing yourself.
yep.
And the court system is supposed to give you more grace than the person that has an attorney, right? I
But
mean,
I had an
literally,
act.
because they
Yeah.
understand you don't know the laws, you don't know the rules. And so they're supposed to give you more grace. And in this case, they used it against you.
Yeah, and when I was in jail, I had a public defender who
Oof.
told me I was a vicious woman who did not obey her husband.
Oh my goodness.
So not much help from there.
How in the world did you make it through all this? I am serious because I'm sitting here. I'm getting like my heart just melts for you. I mean, how I can't even imagine going through one part of this, but this whole story, it just gets worse and worse and worse. How in the world did you make it through this?
I don't know. The grace of God, when you go
Yeah.
through something, there's got to be some grace. I had some techniques that I was able to, help me. I don't know. I spent 4 months in a jail in Las Vegas, and then 2 months in California. And the jail in Las Vegas, the inmates were protecting me. They understood that
Oh,
I did not belong there. And, because of the cancer and different health problem, I was on a special diet. You don't get a special diet in jail.
no,
You don't
no,
know
they don't
what you're
care.
eating. It's like 1,200 calories for $1.50. So I started to eat and I would get so sick. So the
Hmm.
only thing I ate were oranges, and then from the commissary, I got the rancid sunflowers, and I lived on that for 14 weeks. And the inmate would hide their oranges and they'd give it to me. And if the guard would find them, I had to put all the oranges in the trash, and they were punished and were locked in their cell for 2 days. And but they knew they protected me. And then one time one of the gang member came and told me, do you realize you the alpha female here, everybody's respecting you. So I never had problem with the inmate and just being who I was. So sometimes it's not doing something. I thought maybe God put me there so I could help these girls. They
Yeah.
didn't want to help, they just helped each other to not get caught the next time. But just being who I was in my corner reading, and if they had pain, I would do some, craniosacral, and for the 3 first months, I was frantic. I would write to, the presidents of Switzerland knew me, the uh,
I don't blame
all
you.
kind, all kind of association. I would just write, and after 3 months, it seems I became a zombie. I was always wondering, how do people stay in jail? It's because all of a sudden your brain turns into a zombie, and just you go through the motions.
Hmm. Yeah, you kind of yeah, you just kind of give up. I mean, it's,
I wrote so many things. My kids, wrote letters. My uncle went to the United Nations trying to get some justice, and they could do nothing. And there was another gal when I was in California in the jail. If I remember well, she had thrown gasoline on her husband and child and was going to light it. So she had to wear red clothes. That means she was a dangerous one.
mm.
When she went out of her cell, she was handcuffed and, leg cuffed and stuff. When they needed room in the jail, they let her go instead of me.
Somebody's being paid off in this one. I'm sorry. There's just some shady, shady, shady stuff going on. There's too many things. It's not like there's one or
Yeah,
two.
I
There's
was told
too many.
if I had found the right attorney, the judges and the DA would have faced like 15 to 25 years of prison. I didn't tell you, when you are in jail in one state and they want to move you in another state, they have to ask permission of the governors and the attorney generals of both states for permission to move a prisoner. And they lied. They said they had proof that I had physically gone to California to kidnap my children. I have that in black and white. So the DA and the judge lied to the two governors and the two attorney generals.
You still can't go after them? Could you go after them now?
I don't know, when the attorney general changed in Nevada. I went to her and asked her, can we do something about it? Say, oh, that's all archived. I don't deal with old cases.
Yeah, there's not enough in it for her.
No, and there was not enough money. And who goes against judges? That's a problem.
Well, and the thing is, the end goal, I'm sure, in doing something like going after the judges and the DA and stuff, is to change the system so that this type of stuff doesn't happen again. To expose what really truly happened, expose your ex-husband and all his cohorts, and change
I
the
don't have a
system.
problem with my ex-husband because he had a horrible childhood. So
I'm
his
sure.
brain,
Yeah.
got like that. The problem I've had with the judges because they they knew what they were doing. He didn't. He was just, unfortunately, he was damaged from his childhood.
Right, right,
But not the judges. The judges consciously knew what they were doing.
right, right. They knew they were doing wrong. They were put in these positions of trust, and yeah, they were flat out going against the laws and the rules.
Yeah. I work with different organizations changing the laws, but the judge don't follow the laws. So what's the point?
Right, right, right. If they, then you have to appeal it. So that's more time, more money, more stress.
Yes, that's something I was going to say. When I went to the Court of Appeal, they had taken, what is it? It was not audio. Okay, they had audio of my witnesses, and one was Karen Huffer, and the other was another attorney. And they lost them. They had technical
Uh,
problems, so I couldn't give them to the Court of Appeal. Therefore, the appeal could not go forth, and all kind
yeah.
of things like that.
There's just too many things. There's just too many dots that connect that tell me that there is so much more behind the scenes than what you know, obviously.
Yeah, so
So you help people get through this kind of trauma, right? So you help women.
people who have PTSD. I have a client, she's the veteran, and she experienced incest when she was a kid. Then
Mhm.
she had a car accident, was in a coma for like a month. Then she ran away, became a ward of the court. She went into the military. She was raped. So we are, getting her life back. They were going to put her in an institution with a tutor, and now she's doing quite well. She's saving money to buy a house, and she wants to become a paralegal. So
Nice.
even, bad trauma, we can repair them.
Right. I mean,
So
that is what I find so hopeful is that we can heal from this trauma. We can learn to manage it and it won't manage us anymore. And we can't change what happened to us in the past, but it doesn't mean it has to define our future, our present or our
exactly.
future. So
No.
so you help people walk through this, and then how do you help, because you were mentioning, you help people heal afterwards and, heal from going through this traumatic experience.
Mhm.
How did you do that for yourself and how do you do that for others? What did you do for
I had to do
yourself?
something for myself because I had when my colleagues were psychologists, and as I was going through all these trial with the court, they asked me to stop talking about it because they couldn't take it. And I met other women who were going through that and say that's the
Yeah.
same thing. We can have help from a psychologist, psychiatrist, because they get sick hearing what's happening to us, and they have to go to a psychologist who is trained in legal abuse, in the all the stuff that's going in politics and stuff. That's not what
Mhm.
a psychologist is trained into. So I read a lot of books and learn one therapy after another. I had a couple of therapists I took who knew about legal abuse, like Karen Huffer. I remember calling her and says, she calls that being beyond rage. The
Yeah.
problem is when you go through that, you don't have the words to explain. So she called it beyond rage.
Yeah.
I would call her and say, "Hey, Karen, I got another motion and I'm beyond rage." And, we would talk, and then she had a kind of therapy. I was doing different therapies, and that's how we had the support group. And with the therapies we were using, when you help other, it helps you as well.
Yes.
So little by little,
True.
and people can tell me all kind of stuff. I can keep my distance so I can help them. As if you're not trained with that, and you take it on you, and you
Mhm.
have a tendency to get sick or nightmares. And when I got out of jail, I had nightmares, and I found some binaural beats that I would put for an hour before I fell asleep, and that took care of the nightmares. And little by little, I found what helped me.
It's baby steps, right?
It's baby step, and they say you never get out of PTSD. And in some way, it's true. You can, all of a sudden be triggered by something, but
Yeah.
then you can learn the techniques to not be triggered.
Right.
The last time I was triggered was during the COVID situation. I went to the store and I saw people that were waiting 6 feet apart in front of the store, and that brought me back to jail because Going from the jail to the court, you had to go in those long hallways, and we were all attached by our waist one to the other. We had our feet shackled, our hands shackled, and it was those lines of people like 6 feet apart going through these tunnels, hundreds of people. And I saw that in front of the store, and my heart went into,
Mm-hmm.
beating hard. So I went back home and used some of those techniques and just calmed down. And then that doesn't show up any longer. So, who knows? One of the first time I was triggered after jail was because I got in a place where I was tired the same way I had been in jail. You
Oh
don't
yeah.
sleep in jail. They have so much noise and light. You always kind of, and I think I was moving or whatever, hadn't slept much, and all of a sudden I was back in that jail.
Mm-hmm.
So you can be triggered by light. With one time was in a restaurant where the seating arrangement was kind of the same as in our lunchroom. So just moved and then did my techniques on that, and then doesn't, but you have to do it. You could be triggered, but eventually it's years between triggers, and then you know what
Mm-hmm.
to do, and it's not such a big deal any longer.
Yeah, and the biggest thing I think is recognizing when you're triggered and recognizing that you're in a trigger because
Yeah.
when I think about I now recognize when I'm being triggered. I recognize it, but for years I didn't and I reacted, as a result of it and not realizing I can remember thinking at the time, why do I feel like this? Like I felt like I was out of control, but I didn't understand I was being triggered. And then my response was very unhealthy and hurtful usually.
I saw
But
that a couple of months ago because I very seldom do I get angry, but if I get angry, it goes from 0 to 100. Like,
yeah,
woof,
yeah, yep.
it's not gradual, and I don't like incompetence. And I think must have something to do with the jail
Sounds
and
like
the
me.
judges. So I was at a health food store, and the cashier was so incompetent and arguing, and I started to feel really angry, and then driving back to the reason, why would I get angry? So I did again these techniques, and I never had that anger again.
Which
But
technique
yeah,
do you use?
I use a lot of the tapping and imagery and self hypnosis, and I kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
mix different things,
Yeah. So,
and then
those are the tools that you have in your toolbox that work for you that when you when you're feeling triggered or whatever.
yeah, and I had a friend in Las Vegas who also had audios that have frequencies to help with PTSD. So I
Yeah.
listened to that, and there's all kind of different things I've learned over the years. When I have a problem, I look for a solution, and then it goes in my toolbox.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the benefit and I talk about it all the time in my podcast and that is having the self-awareness because the self-awareness is what's going to head up and head off a lot of the stuff that I talk about when I didn't have self-awareness. I created a lot of problems for other people and I had a lot of cleanup to do and I don't like cleaning up. I don't like that. That's not
Yeah.
fun. It's not fun. It's not and sometimes, it ruins relationships. And so, the self-awareness can empower you to catch the triggers, to catch yourself so that you don't do that, so that you don't have the cleanup.
Yeah, I tell people it starts with awareness. Then you have to have willingness.
Ah,
Some
there
people
you
have
go.
no will and they don't. You need a willingness. That's when I come with the tools, the strategies, the technique, and then you still have to act on them, and then you have success.
Right, right. So, what would you tell a person who was in your shoes? Like what would you tell our listeners that are headed in the direction where you were?
Well, when I started in psychology years ago, we were still on the therapist couch for weeks, weeks after weeks for years to maybe figure out why we had a problem. And now we can often resolve a problem in 1 hour. It's not the painful therapy where you talk and you talk.
Mhm.
We change the story, we change the wiring in your brain. That's a wiring in your brain that needs to be changed. And it
Correct.
can get done like that. So it's not those long hours of therapy where you're going to have to relive everything. We don't relive things, we just remove them. Okay, we change the circuitry in your brain, and then it's gone. and we move on to another one, and then all of a sudden the whole thing collapses, and you can get to having a meaningful, fulfilling, and even a happy life.
Yep. And
And
that's
when you look
actually,
back and say, how in the world did I do that?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, yeah, because I think about that myself, and that's exactly what I've done is I'm working on rewiring the way I think, and it's finding your normal, right? I didn't have a normal upbringing, and so one
I
of the
had a
things.
beautiful childhood.
Oh,
A
that's
wonderful
wonderful.
childhood. I grew up in Switzerland. Heidi and Pollyanna were my heroes. So I turned everything, I saw the world with rose colored glasses. I wasn't prepared for what I went through.
Yeah.
And my mom just passed away 4 months ago. My parents had been married
Mm.
65 years, never had an argument. And we're talking, I have two brothers and say, yeah, and when we had spouses that argued, we had no clue what to do because our parents never argued. They were always happy and we were a happy family.
That's true.
So,
We only can do what we know.
yeah.
That's something that I'm realizing. It sounds kind of crazy, but I've realized really over the last several months is that we do the things that we do because that's what we know. We can't do the things that we don't know. And
Yeah.
and that's empowering. Actually, it helps us understand each other and helps us understand ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. When, the people had really messed up were psychologists. They were supposed to
I
be my
know.
colleagues.
I
Why
know.
did they lie? And the first time I got a report, actually, one of my first clients was a woman who had lost custody to a guy who was a known drug addict, and he was into alcohol and DUI, and he had the custody of a 3-year-old. And a client of mine said, can you help this woman? And said, I went back to her and said, I don't know what the judge sees in her to take the child away. I mean, yes, she's depressed, but what am I missing that the judge sees?
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I had the same custody evaluator that made those 13 pages without anything that was true. And I was reading that my client had become a friend, and I was reading saying, and I told her, if that's the type of mother I am, he should have custody. And she took me and shook me and said, it's not you, it's a system. And yeah, another custody evaluator said, yeah, the father is abusive. I don't know if he said about beating them, but he removes everything that they like. He doesn't allow to do things, and keep them, doesn't feed them right. But the mother is dangerous. She is baking her own bread and feeding them organic food, and
There's no
she's
logic.
alienating the child. Yeah, and you read that report and say, what in the world is he talking about?
How can you think like that? How can you be so have such a different mind like that? I don't understand that. I don't understand how you can.
They also have been brainwashed. There is some powerful
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
Actually, it was funny because we went to his office, and I don't remember if I had the 7 children, but he had already talked to me and then to a couple of kids. And then all of a sudden he comes out running to his secretary to say, I have a headache. I need something. Because my kids, they were homeschooled. They spoke their mind.
Good.
And they told him, what was happening with the father. But you're right. It's amazing how he can twist their mind. Like my youngest daughter, she's in her 30s now. And she contacted me, said she had contacted her father because she wanted to know the other side. And
Mm.
she said, I mean, he loved you and he still loves you so much. You were the love of his life. Like, Mom, why in the world did you divorce? And I have so many letters from her how he was abusive toward her. And now all of a sudden I'm the bad one because I divorced a guy who loves me so much.
I'm telling you, narcissists have an
Yep.
amazing talent of doing that. And if they only use that for good.
He had so much energy in his hand. He could have been a healer. It was amazing.
Oh, my
But
my late husband too. He was very intelligent. He
mhm.
was very talented with his hands. He could build things that were just amazing. I saw there were times I saw his real heart, It was
Mm-hmm.
just, he didn't expose that very often. And I know that his story was he too was abused as a child. But that behavior that they have, because he accused me of, I mean, my story is nothing compared to yours at all. I mean, I only was married to him for a year and a half, and he was, there were a couple little, I wouldn't even say red flags, yellow flags before we got married. And I went against my intuition, but it was after we
Mm-hmm.
got married when he really showed his true colors. But the crazy, excuse my French, shit that he would accuse me of, it was just, he accused me. I mean, he accused me of one of the things he accused me of borrowing. I asked to borrow $20,000, and I would remember if I ever asked to borrow $20,000. I couldn't figure out for the longest time. It took me months to figure out where he got that number from, because that's this very specific number, right?
I
Very
think I was
specific.
accused of having made $6 million,
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, I figured out where he got. It took me a few months. This is crazy. It took me a few months, like, because that figure stuck out to me. I'm like, why is that number? So I remember I was supposed to be getting a settlement, and what I had said to him, when I get my settlement, I'm going to give you $20,000 to put into the house so we can change out the windows, make it more efficient. I
Mhm.
was telling him what we could use the money for. That's how far he twisted that. He took that story later on and then started, accusing me. Well, when you wanted to borrow $20,000, what are you talking about? And they would get that weird smile on his face. "Oh,
Yeah.
what are you talking about?" But I had healed enough. I had enough healing in me, and I already lived in a marriage that was really unhealthy, that I saw that I didn't understand he was a narcissist. I just knew it was crazy behavior. And I just
Yeah.
knew I couldn't be around it. I was not doing this. I have never been accused of crazy shit that like what he was accusing me of, and not trusting me. And, I'd had enough. So I was getting out, and my situation would have been nothing like yours. But until you have lived in that type of relationship, you have
And then
no
when you go through a
idea.
divorce, people tell you, well, you really should you should get along for the good of the children. How can you?
You're getting along. He's not. You're the one that's trying to make you guys get along or try to work with him. That's the thing. People don't understand. And they're so good at hiding it to where only you see it. Only
Hmm.
you
Oh
see
yeah.
it. And they can manipulate attorneys and judges. I saw it with my friend. She should have won this lawsuit. She had an attorney. He did not. And he won.
Yeah, I saw that in a case too,
He won
where
attorney's fees and he didn't have an attorney. How did that happen? I'm serious. She had to pay his attorney fees that he had no attorney.
yeah, nothing makes sense. I went to a 3-day trial with another lady who was going through the same thing. So the DA knew that he had molested the children and said, but on a technicality, we couldn't go after him.
Oh
There
God.
was two child psychologists who had worked with the children, said the father molested one of the girls. The brother could hear them through the wall, and he testified. And the father got custody. Now, she had some visitation. She never got the visitation, so she appealed. I didn't go to the next trial. A friend of mine, we always had somebody with us. And she said it was crazy. The judge was in tears about what the girl, what was going on. The judgment was, well, she's so used to being with a father, we cannot remove her now.
Oh my God. See, we need to educate these judges on what happens with
It's
child
they
abuse and
have the
trauma.
education, like you said, there is something behind.
It's so dark. It's so
Yeah, it's
dark.
dark. The children had an attorney. They gave she didn't do anything. She told me, yeah, I see there is a lot of abuse, but the judge wants 50-50 custody. There is nothing I can do. But she contacted my consulate and said she's not going to win because there is a secret society behind. Like she
Uh,
said, the neo-Nazi, and then my daughter said, no, it's the no, she was told it was like the Ku Klux Klan, and my daughter said that's the neo-Nazi, and several people told me there is a secret society behind your case.
yeah. It sounds like it. It
And it
makes
was
sense.
scary.
It's
I'm that
very
little
scary.
I'm that little girl who grew up in Switzerland with Heidi and Pollyanna, and now I have a neo-Nazi after me, and the
Right? right? And the saddest part really of all of this is the children and what they go through and what happens to them.
Yeah.
That's the heartbreaking
My
part.
kids are doing pretty good, except in relationships.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. It makes sense. Whew. So, if our listeners want to reach out to you, if they're struggling with this and they need help, how can they reach out to you?
well, they can, go on my website, and I give people 20, 30 minutes, sometime more, just to chat about what's going on, whether I can help or not, or what resources I have. I know some people. And it's daniellejcoaching.com/calendar if you want to talk with me, and go from there. And yeah, I hope you're not in a similar case, but I've
I've
known
heard too
so
many.
many, and it's validating to know that you're not the crazy one. But that's
Right.
what makes people so scared, because if you're the crazy one, they don't have to be afraid of anything. But if that's a system that's like that, then it could go after them. It's called cognitive dissonance. They don't
Mhm.
want to know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's frightening and I don't know. I don't think there's one answer. I think there's several answers to fixing it, but I don't know even know where to start.
No, because I've seen, they're redoing here in Colorado, getting new laws and stuff, which is what we were doing in California. That was totally worthless.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you can make all the
So
laws you want, but if the judges aren't gonna follow them, that's
no, and
it makes no
it's
sense.
their courtroom, and they can do whatever they want.
I mean, I think we have to keep pressing on because the answer certainly isn't, well, let's just throw our hands up in the air and just let the system work the way it works,
No,
right? I
I
mean,
think what did I read? I don't remember. 1950s, or when the court system went from natural law to statutory law. That doesn't make any sense, because you not judge according to facts now. You judge according to different statutes they had and different
mhm.
cases, and they don't even look at your case.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's just crazy. I again, I know the whole court system as well as our whole foster system and the way that the children are taken care of needs to be completely revamped, and I don't see any government official stepping up to try to change that.
they're making money with the foster
Right.
system. I've
Right.
heard many cases like that. And how a man or a woman is being judged is totally different.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, they would, social services would come impromptu to my home. But for him, they would contact him 2 days before, so he could fill up the refrigerator, clean the house, and everything.
Get everything in order so it looks perfect when they show up. Yeah, it sounds like there is definitely in your case absolutely more going on behind the scenes than what you knew, and you I applaud you for being strong and sticking with it because you did have other choices but you stuck it out as until the end, until the kids turned 18 and were on their own.
Yep, and we'll see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a road. Well, thank you so much for thank you so much for sharing your story and thank you for, being there to help other women in this situation, and they need a support system. That's a really lonely, scary, crazy place to be. And so
Yeah.
thank you for doing that. And
And if they're willing to get some tools, now I was going to help a group, but what they want to do is change the judge, and I cannot help with that. I can help you
yeah,
personally to, stay strong, resilient, and recover.
right, right. I mean, that's the thing because in this case, you're so busy. I call it pouring out because you're busy taking care of, trying to get all this taken care of that you can run yourself down and you're not taking care of
Yeah,
yourself. And it's
yeah,
important that in order to stay strong, you need to take care of yourself as well so that you can be strong and try to be as clear headed as you can because I can't even imagine how overwhelming this can be.
yeah. And it's good to have support. Actually, I made a page a few weeks ago about this story. It's called Phoenix on my website.
Okay.
So, and that's where people can. And I wrote a book called "Yes, You Can Recover from PTSD and Legal Abuse."
Ah, I like that. Excellent. Well,
Thank you so
listener,
much, Lisa.
Thank you. This has been great, and I know it's not an easy story to talk about. It's I felt a
I
lot of
have
pain in my heart.
recovered. It's hard for people to hear it.
It is. It is. I mean, I understand what you're saying, because that's the same with me. Like, I feel like I've recovered, from so much of my abuse, and I can share my stories, and it doesn't have that same effect on me. But hearing other people's stories, so many times my heart was just like, oh,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
many times, but listeners, if we'll have all her contact information. If you feel like you need to talk about this and have support, you can reach out to Danielle. And if you know anybody who's struggling with this, share this with them, share this podcast with them, so that we can get the word out there and get the support for these parents.
yeah.
So
I've heard cases where mothers lost custody of their babies to horrible thing, and that still grips me.
and that we're talking about what that does to the mom, but what does that do to the child? Being separated from their mother.
Yeah, then the mother cannot nurse any longer. She has to pump milk and give it to the father so he could. Yeah, it
And
just
there's a connection when you're nursing your baby. I mean, I
yes,
know I
yep.
connected with my son when I nursed him. That was
Oh
really
yeah,
important to me. I can't imagine having that taken away. That's horrible for both.
yeah, absolutely.
So, listeners, share this podcast with anybody that may be struggling with this, and share this information. So, thank you so much again.
Well, thank you, Lisa.